You're listening to an AINC original podcast. We believe you don't have to do life without a compass. Let us be your guide on this amazing journey. Welcome to Navigating Life with Vision Loss.
Hello, and thank you for joining us for Navigating Life with Vision Loss. I am your host, Kim Wardlow. I just want to remind everyone of Colorado Gives Day coming up the first Tuesday of December, but you can schedule your donations now, so you don't have to worry about what date that particular day or date, and you can do that at coloradogives.org for us or any other charity that you are interested in donating to. Well, I'm super excited today to have Penny Melville Brown as my guest. She is the blind baker, but that's just one dimension of her. And there's so much to her life and her journey that I want you to know about. Just a couple of things. She has been awarded the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire. She has also been awarded the Holman Prize for Blind Ambition, and is an author, as well as teaching us how to cook and bake. So while we are focused on food this month, and we will talk about food, there's much more to this program today than just a good Christmas cake. So let me introduce you to Penny Melville Brown. Thank you so much for joining the program today.
Thank you, Kim, and hello from Hampshire, but over in the United Kingdom. And that's where I am. And I think you're early in the morning as we make this recording. Here, I'm late in the afternoon, but it's lovely to be with you all.
Penny, as I said, obviously we want to hear your fascinating stories about cooking and your world tour of cooking with other chefs. But really, your journey started long before that. And as you said, you kind of have different chapters in your life. Could you share a bit of that with our listeners?
Well, I hope you're all sitting comfortably, because it could be a long story, but let's get to the heart of it. I started losing my sight in around 1990, that sort of time. I can't really remember. And to be quite honest, I don't really care, because by that stage, I was an officer in the then Women's Royal Naval Service, which was the female branch of the Royal Navy. And I would wear my uniform, but with blue stripes on my arms, as opposed to gold ones that the men had in those days. And I'd done all sorts of really interesting jobs. I'd done NATO intelligence in Naples, in Italy. I'd done home defense and war planning, and actually with quite a bit of American input to that. I'd done corporate public relations in the Ministry of Defence in London, and I'd also looked after, I was running the University Royal Naval units. So in each unit, many universities around the country, including Aberdeen, which I think you know about, Kim, I used to have a unit, fast patrol boat, a little crew of people who were running it, and then the midshipmen and women who came from the university undergraduates. And one day I was sitting at lunch, as one does, in the wardroom. So this is a historic wardroom in Portsmouth, which is a major naval port in the UK. Sitting in the wardroom over lunch, and somebody sitting next to me said, "What we really need is a woman barrister in the Navy." And, you know, the barristers, those are the lawyers that wear the little wigs and the long flowing gowns in our courts. And I thought, yeah, I think I could do that. And that was sort of my next big career challenge, was to become the first woman barrister in the Navy. So I went off to London and I did a year of academic law. Then I did a year at bar school. So that was putting it into sort of practical application. Then I did pupillage, where I was taken out as an apprentice to a proper barrister. So I learned, when to be quiet and when to say things. And then they let me loose. And I was really fortunate because it's a very expensive bit of career training, a bit of career change. But the Navy paid for it all. And I was still in the Navy, went back and started my first legal job. And that was in Portsmouth at a big shore establishment called HMS Nelson. And that ran the biggest magistrates' court in the Royal Navy. And we would have people from all over the world sent back to us if they were allegedly offending. And my job there was to advise the prosecution, to advise the defence, and then to advise the Commodore who was making the judgment on, firstly, guilty or not, and secondly, possible sentence. So that was me, really happy. This first woman role, really successful, great life, lovely house, everything was fabulous. And then my eyes started playing up. Da, 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 da. So my eyesight started failing, and I was getting some treatment, and this was in my right eye, and it was sort of holding it, but just. And then I went down to, I actually became a lieutenant commander in the Royal Navy then, because the women were integrated into the Navy. And I now had gold stripes on my sleeves, 2.5 gold stripes. And I went down as the staff legal advisor to the flag officer, the Admiral in Plymouth. And I'd only been there about 8 months, and it was clear that my eyes were really getting quite serious. And so I went up to the Moorfields Eye Hospital, which is the famous major eye hospital in the UK. And they gave me vast amounts of a steroid. And I think it was, something like 120 odd milligrams a day. It was huge, huge amount with other medication. And so I blew up like a balloon within a couple of weeks. I wasn't able to walk. I wasn't able to work. I could lay on a bed or on a couch. I could only just breathe. And I was going back up to Moorfields. And after a few months, they said, this isn't working. I had the choice of losing my right eye or dying, basically, because my kidneys and liver were starting to fail. So that was a fairly simple.
And so that was, a pretty clear-cut choice then.
Yeah. It didn't take a long time. Mm-hmm. And also because the steroids were doing dreadful things to me. I had sideboards. You know what those are? Where the hair grows down in front of your ears. And my eyebrows were getting thicker. And I was getting a moustache and all those sorts of things.
Oh, my goodness.
And I'd put on vast amounts of weight. Everything was miserable. But I decided I would get better, and I did get better. It took me, I was off sick for 14 months, but then I went back to work in the Navy. I could still drive. I still had sight in my left eye. I took on this new job where I was definitely in charge, but it was quite a struggle for me because I remember my boss was on the floor above me. We were in a very old Georgian terrace of houses, which had been changed into the offices of this flag officer. And to get upstairs, I had to climb upstairs, and it was a huge effort for me. And I was back in uniform, and uniform was very tight and very difficult because my body had changed, and I had all this fair hair on my face, so it was very difficult coping with just living, I think, really. It was a huge challenge. And I was very lucky because I had one of my warrant officers from a previous job came and worked with me, and he was an enormous support and took over the running of part of the registry for me. But anyway, then my left eye started to fail. So I had to give up driving. So I got myself 2 adult tricycles. Do you know what those are?
I've seen them, yes.
So I had one at home with a little electric engine on it, so I could cycle into the local town and do shopping. And the other one I kept in the dockyard so that I could cycle. Can you imagine this mad, very hairy, odd woman officer who changed out of uniform, cycling on this tricycle, adult size, through the naval base to go to the market in Portsmouth to get her shopping? How bonkers was that? Anyway.
But you still had enough sight that you were able to.
I still had enough sight. I couldn't drive, but I could just about manage a trike. And that went on until one day I was cycling at home and I suddenly realised I can't really see the pavement. I couldn't see where the footpath ended and the road started. And I thought, this isn't safe. It's not safe for me,
right,
and it's not safe for other people. So I turned off the road and happened to end up in somebody's front drive. And then I cycled home on the pavement, and that was the last time I cycled.
Those are hard decisions, when you have that realization, but to be able to actually make the decision and change.
It was incredibly difficult to get rid of my car. I kept it for probably a year after I stopped driving because emotionally, psychologically, to admit to myself that I could no longer drive and that my life was going to be so restricted in future was a massive step. When I couldn't drive anymore, I was going by taxi and train to work in the naval base. I was still wearing uniform, and I was wearing uniform and using a white cane. And I must have been probably the first female officer who was using a white cane in uniform since probably the Second World War, if not ever. So I was quite strange. And I couldn't wear my tricorn hat because I couldn't see who was saluting me, and I couldn't see other people if I had to salute them. So I had to carry my hat under my arm so that they understood, what with the white stick, that all that saluting lark was out of the question.
Yeah.
But by then I'd also been promoted to commander. So I was then one of 8 women commanders in the Royal Navy. And I took on another job. And this is really important stuff, actually, is that the Royal Navy was not covered by equality legislation in terms of employing disabled people. And you can understand that to an extent because they are a military service and they need people who can go and do military stuff. And so they weren't covered by that, but they were really good to me. So I went off and did a staff commander job. And then I went off and did another job, again in the naval base, where I was changing, if I said the annual appraisal system, do you understand that terminology?
Is that like an annual review?
Yes. So in the military, obviously, we have annual reviews or even more frequently. And so you write about people, you score them, you give them marks.
Yes.
And that equips them for promotion or not. And in the military, promotion is probably the most important thing that carries on. So I was changing our performance review system for about 37,000 people, which was all the Royal Navy other ranks and the Royal Marine other ranks. And that was a big job, because I was modernising it, changing the structure, adding things like equality and diversity into it, getting it computerised so it would work on the ships and all the rest of it. And then I had a young lieutenant who I equipped and trained so he could go all the way around the Navy and train people how to do it. And so that's what I was doing as a blind officer in the Royal Navy. And I tell you all of this because if you ever meet an employer or somebody who takes on anyone, they need to understand the difference they can make to anybody's life who acquires a disability. Your numbers will be very similar to here in the UK. Here we have about 20% of the population are disabled people. And the vast majority, big numbers, gain their disabilities during their working lives. And you're talking 60 to 70%. So that's a lot of people. And if you've got an employer who will keep you on, make some changes, help you continue to work, help you to feel that you have a place in life, a place in society, a place in, at work amongst your colleagues, that makes a huge psychological difference to how you cope with the rest of your life. And certainly for me, it convinced me that I could do really stunning jobs in the Navy or elsewhere. And it gave me the huge self-confidence to make a difference for the next 20 odd years, more than 20 years.
No, I think it's also interesting. And, we have listeners of all ages. So people who are just starting careers and they're dealing with employers for the first time, clear through to folks who lost vision later, like you said, while they were employed or older. So, I think it's all interesting.
Well, I was leaving the Navy probably in my early to mid 40s. So you can tell how old, I'm really old now. But, in those days.
Well, I'm 57,
yeah.
So
well,
you're not that much older.
A child bride. But yes, there was I trying to look at the rest of my life because eventually they medically discharged me from the Royal Navy. So I had found it incredibly difficult to try and get work or understand about employment with a disability. Part of the problem was that being in the military, you were quite divorced from everyday life, that everybody else knew because we weren't so integrated into society. We lived in our small, military cultures. So I didn't understand about how to get a job. And when I tried, even with the ex-service charities, they had no idea how to help a disabled person. And it was extraordinary. So I decided...
That is because they must have lots of people with disabilities, especially these days with,
yes,
with wars or
wars,
controversies and things. Yes.
Yes. Don't get bogged down with wars and, military accidents or training. Actually, people just gain disabilities. If I say 70% of people acquire their disability during their working lives, quite a lot of those are going to have been in the military. You don't need a war to get a disability. But they weren't very well equipped. So I decided I would dedicate the rest of my working life to helping other people with disabilities to get back to work. And that's what I did. So I set up my own business. I was working at policy level with government, with businesses. I was a UK delegate to the European and World Blind Unions. I traveled the world talking about disability, work, blindness. I helped people, doing practical things, getting back to work. And it wasn't just writing a CV. The CV is just one card in a big pack. The most important thing is getting that confidence back so that you've been knocked back by a health problem, and perhaps all your previous training, all your previous skills and experience are no longer relevant to you. But perhaps you need to say, what is the essential me? What is the thing that makes me tick? What do other people value in me? And how can I remarket that in a different workplace and make the very best of the skills I've got? So I was doing all of that. I also learned about self-employment. And I was approached and asked to become the chairman of a little tiny not-for-profit organisation called Business Ability. And it was all about disabled people learning to be self-employed. And I bet it's very similar in America. But in the UK, disabled people who work are more likely to be self-employed, running their own businesses, than non-disabled people who work. And it's something that lots of people don't realise. Particularly,
Well, when you consider the prejudices and employers questioning, oh well, if you're blind or if you have whatever issue, whatever disability, how can you do this job? Or, will we have to give you so much help? I think that can be such a battle. Sometimes creating your own business, it's certainly not easy, but it might seem less of a battle than dealing with employers.
I hear what you say about employers' attitudes. Over here, that would be against the law.
Well, it is here too, but it still happens.
I know. I understand entirely. We can write as many laws as we like, but actually, unless you're capable and willing and got the money to sue them, you're going nowhere with that one, are you? And what we found, I spent over 7 years delivering self-employment projects in some of the most deprived areas of the UK with very high numbers of disabled people. And giving people the chance to take charge of their own lives in relation to work was super. We had about 40% of them succeeded. And they either started their own business, or some of them, having gained new confidence, actually found work, and others went on to get some more vocational training before they started their business or went back to work. And that is a stunningly high success rate for any project with disabled people, with work as a potential outcome. So that all worked very well. And I was still I'd realised by then that I could work very hard with disabled people, but unless I changed attitudes of employers and work colleagues and all sorts of other people about the consequences of disability, I was still potentially hitting my head against a brick wall. So in 2016, I wanted to find ways of demonstrating to the rest of the world, the rest of the non-disabled community, that just because we've got a health problem, a disability, or whatever, we can still do things just like them, and often very much better. And I'd cooked all my life. And so I was making about 50 Christmas cakes that year for friends and family, as one does. And
that's a lot, though.
It is.
That's
Some
a lot
are
of
very
cakes.
small, just individual ones, but that's what I've done for years. And people think, gosh, that's a bit odd for a blind person to do. Well, I wasn't having any of that, I'm not accepting that sort of commentary. So I got my brother, who happened to be free, and he came and took videos of me making all these cakes. And I confess they were incredibly amateur. But off I went and did those, and then I did some more recipes for Christmas. And this was and then in January 2017, I got this email from some people, I have never heard of them, called Lighthouse, no idea, from San Francisco. And they said, would you like to enter our competition and win $25,000? Well, do you remember that decision about giving up my right eye or done?
Yeah. And another,
Yes. Oh, gosh, I'm going to have to ponder on this one. But I think actually I was quite careful to make sure it wasn't a scam.
Well, there's that. Yeah.
But the long and the short of it was that I decided I would do cooking because it was a good thing to demonstrate at a domestic level that visually impaired people, disabled people could do stuff. I'd been doing it for years, and it was very popular in the media. Well, food is always popular in the media, so it might get us a bit more publicity. I think the important thing about this prize, run by this San Francisco organization, which was to promote blind ambition, was that it was international and it was celebrating a chap called James Holman. Never heard of him. No idea. Clearly some American.
I hadn't either, but he's actually very interesting.
No, let me tell you. James Holman was a lieutenant in the Royal Navy. Coincidence. James Holman went blind when he was serving in the Navy. He almost certainly had the same condition as me.
Oh, wow.
And he was supposed to, like me, leave the Navy, sit quietly at home on a war pension and just, count the pounds coming in. He went off independently and became the most famous travel writer of his time.
Wow.
And that was about 200 years before.
Yeah, I was going to say, many, many years ago. Yeah.
200, yeah.
Wow.
So the amazing thing was that, he was so like me. So I thought, if I'm going to do this cooking lark, I can't do it just at home. I'm going to have to go around the world, and show that, Navy hasn't lost its powder.
Right.
So I had to put together plans and project ideas and PR and all the timetable and the costings.
Well, and how did you make connections with all these chefs? Did you have to do that yourself or?
Yeah, absolutely. I wrote to everybody I knew. And because I'd been operating reasonably internationally in the past, and I'd had all my Navy connections,
sure,
and I had family connections, people sort of popped up from nowhere. I have no idea where some of these places were. One day I got a phone call from a chap in Costa Rica. And he said, a friend of, a contact of yours put me in touch with you and you want to come and cook and you're a blind person. Would you like to come and cook with me in the jungle in Costa Rica? Of course I would.
Why not?
I'd love that. Yeah. And so it was completely random. Just another one. There were a couple of other old naval contacts who I had never had contact with, for decades. Mm-hmm. They popped up. So in the end, I was one of, I think, 200 entries from 27 countries. And I was one of the 3 winners of the $25,000 each. Ahmet was from San Francisco, and he kayaked across the Bosphorus solo as a blind person. And Ojok, and I regret to say it is the late Ojok, because he subsequently died after he'd done his competition. He was an amazing beekeeper in Uganda and used the prize money to teach other blind people in Uganda how to keep bees. And I cooked around the world. So I went to San Francisco for a start, then down to Costa Rica, cooking in the jungle. Very wet, rainy season in Costa Rica. And nearly got stuck there for a week or more because we were caught in a hurricane.
Oh, my goodness.
Up to Norfolk, Virginia. And I was cooking in Virginia Beach with an old naval pal. Mm-hmm. I was over in Chongqing in China. Chongqing is the largest city in the world. It's the size of Scotland. It's got a population about 37 million. And I was cooking with the head chefs of probably one of the top hotels in the city. But I also cooked with local people. Mm-hmm. and local restaurateurs. So I had, huge amounts of different experiences there. I went from there on to Australia, and I cooked with another blind chef in Sydney, another one in Melbourne. I cooked with all sorts of people in a place called Kiama. And then I flew on to Malawi in Africa. And I was in Lilongwe, in the capital, at their most prestigious hotel in that capital, where I cooked with the head chef. But I also cooked out in the villages around the capital, where they had no running water, no electricity, and literally it was cooking on an open fire, a couple of bricks on the ground.
Wow, that would be challenging.
It was all sorts of things. And I cooked with the albino group of Malawi, who you can imagine, if you're albino in Malawi, you stand out a great deal. And also, not only are you pale, and therefore they think of you as spirits and ghosts. A lot of people have visual impairments because of their condition, but they are often socially excluded.
Yes.
Some people have problems getting, education. Some people have problems getting jobs. Some people, and this was back in 2017, so it's not a long time ago. Some people were being killed because
I was going to say there's violence committed against that group.
Against this condition. And then when they were buried, their bones were dug up and exported for ritual magic.
Oh my goodness, that's horrible.
So it is. And, we think visually impaired people, in the UK, in the USA, fat, dumb and happy in comparison, aren't we? How dare we complain? Get on with life and make the best of it, I think. And there were some people there getting on with life and making the best of it. And, one of them was a school teacher. And there was another one called Lazarus. And somebody had given him a guitar, and he'd got a drum, and he got some wire and some beer bottle tops that he'd strung on the wire, which went round his ankle. So he could sit on a little stool, play his guitar, hit the drum with his foot, which made the little tambourine round his ankle rattle. And that's what he did. And that's how he made money to feed his family. And, you look at the courage that it takes to do that within a society that is not very receptive of you as a person just because of how you look, which is already not a very rich society in Malawi. And there you are, trying to make a go of it. And the pop star Madonna?
Yes.
She heard about him. She got some of her people to make a feature film about him. So Lazarus now has his music promoted internationally.
Oh, wow. That's a great story.
That had not happened when I met him. And what I'm really trying to say to you is, do you remember we talked about confidence and determination and motivation? And not everybody is going to win out, but there are opportunities for some people. And if you're open to that and you have the drive and determination, that opportunity may come your way, and it is worth grabbing.
My goodness, can you believe that story? I cannot wait for you guys to come back next week. What an amazing episode from Penny Melville Brown, all the way from the UK. Penny, if you listen to this, thank you so much for coming on this show, and we're going to dive into your episode next week. Just wanted to wish everybody a fantastic and wonderful Thanksgiving. From Jonathan and the entire staff at AINC, we could not be doing what we are doing without your listens, your downloads, your support, your giving through Colorado Gives, which by the way, is happening December 5th, or it'll be over December 5th. So get those dollars in so that we can do more of this content, so we can push out more of these amazing stories. Come back next week again, as we are going to be with Penny Melville Brown one more time to close out our Navigating Life with Vision Loss segment, Food, for the month of November. We really hope that this episode has helped you and inspired you to navigate your life with vision loss. Have a good week.